Norval Pichon was the most attentive man I'd ever met. And I need you to sit with that sentence for a moment, because that's exactly how it starts. Attention. So much attention, it feels like sunlight after years in the shade. I met Norval at a Zydeco dance in Houston, fall of 2015. I was 65, he was 69. Retired postal supervisor, widowed. Pressed shirt, good shoes, danced like he meant it. He danced with me 3 times that night and asked for my number before I left the parking lot. Called the next day. Not 2 days later, not a week. The next day. And for those first few months, I felt like the only woman in the world. Flowers on my porch, phone calls every evening. He remembered details, the name of the book I was reading, the flavour of tea I liked, the fact that my granddaughter Soline had a piano recital coming up. He asked about it. He remembered. After 8 years alone, 8 years since my husband Antoine passed, that kind of attention felt like oxygen. I didn't realise you could suffocate on oxygen if someone controls the valve. And for a little while, I thought that's what love was supposed to feel like. Someone who couldn't get enough of you. I didn't understand that couldn't get enough and wouldn't let go are not the same thing. It started with a sigh, 3 months in, Saturday morning. I told Norval I was driving over to my daughter Rosalie's house to spend the day with Suline and Marcellus, my grandbabies. They were little then, 5 and 2. Saturday was our day, had been since they were born. Norval didn't say no. Listen to me, he never said no. That's what makes this so hard to explain to people who haven't lived it. He said, "Of course, go ahead." But before the words there was the sigh. A small exhale, not dramatic. You could miss it if you weren't paying attention. And then, I just had this idea we could spend the day together. But it's fine. Go be with your babies. Go be with your babies. Like he was giving me permission to see my own grandchildren. Like it was generous of him to let me. I went to Rosalie's that day, but I left an hour early, drove to Norval's instead. He didn't ask me to come back early. He didn't have to. The sigh did it. That one breath before the words. It planted a little seed of guilt right in the center of my chest, and I watered it myself by cutting my time with those children short. That was the first time. It was not the last. Now, I need to tell you about Wednesdays. For 22 years, every Wednesday, I had lunch with my 3 closest friends. Eulame Broussard, Delphine, Yolande. We called ourselves nothing. We weren't that kind of group. We just showed up, every week, for 22 years. Through births, deaths, divorces, surgeries, retirements. That table was the most consistent thing in my life outside of my family. Norval never told me not to go, not once. Here's what he did instead. He'd call at 11:30, just as I was picking up my purse, with something that needed me. His printer wasn't working. He couldn't find a document. He'd had a dizzy spell and wanted me to come check on him. Never an emergency. Just enough to delay me, worry me, pull my attention. Or he'd plan something for Wednesday afternoon, tickets to something, a reservation, a drive, that meant I had to leave lunch early. Or he'd say nothing at all. I'd come home from Wednesday lunch and Norval would be quiet. Not angry, quiet, withdrawn. And I'd spend the rest of the evening trying to figure out what I'd done wrong. Until I realized what I'd done wrong was leave. Over 8 months, 8 months of sighs and phone calls and Wednesday evening silences, I went from never missing a lunch to missing 2 or 3 a month. And each time I missed, Norval was warmer, more attentive, more loving. The message was clear, even if the words were never spoken. When you give me everything, I give you everything. When you don't, I disappear. My husband, Antoine, God rest that man, used to say, "Tell the girls I said hello." He loved my Wednesdays. He understood that a woman with friends is a woman with a spine. Norval understood that too, which is exactly why he went after them. And his line, his signature every single time I made plans with anyone was, "I just miss you when you're gone." Sounds sweet, doesn't it? Sounds like love. I thought it was love. But love doesn't keep a tab. Love doesn't make you feel guilty for having a full life. That sentence, "I just miss you when you're gone," wasn't affection. It was a claim. 10 months in, I'm at Rosalie's kitchen table, one of the Saturdays I actually made it over there. And my daughter looks at me and says, "Mama, you used to come over every Saturday. Now I'm lucky if I see you twice a month. And when you do come, you're checking your phone the whole time." I got defensive. I said, "I'm not being managed, Rosalie. He just likes spending time with me." And Rosalie, my daughter, 51 years old, a woman who does not mince words, she said, "You're not busy, Mama. You're managed." I left angry, called Norval on the drive home and told him Rosalie was being dramatic. And you know what Norval said? "Some people don't understand what we have." And I believed him. I believed him because that's exactly how it works. He had isolated me just enough that his voice was the loudest one in my life. The people who loved me, the people who could see what was happening, he had turned into background noise. 2 more months of shrinking, and then 2 things happened in the same week that I could not explain away. First, Norval was at my house, standing in my bedroom. He noticed the framed photo of Antoine on my dresser, same place it had been for 9 years. He'd seen it 100 times, but this time he said, light, almost joking, "You ever think about putting that in a drawer? Might be nice for us to have our own space." He smiled when he said it, and my stomach turned. Antoine wasn't a rival. He was my husband of 31 years, the father of my child, a man who had been dead for 9 years, and Norval wanted him in a drawer, because even the dead were competition. Even my grief belonged to him. I didn't put the photo away, but I didn't say anything either. Not yet. That same week, Wednesday, I made it to lunch for the first time in 3 weeks. May, Delphine, Yolande, all there. We ate, we talked. It felt like coming up for air. After Delphine and Yolande left, May stayed. She reached across the table and took my hand, and she looked at me with 22 years of friendship in her eyes, and she said, "Ceci, I've known you for 22 years. You are the woman who shows up. For everybody. That's who you are. And I have watched you disappear for the last year. You are not showing up for your grandkids. You are not showing up for Rosalie. You are barely showing up here." She paused. "And I need to ask you something. What is he giving you that's worth everything you're giving up?" I opened my mouth, and nothing came out. Not one word. Because the answer was nothing. Norval was giving me attention, constant, consuming, total attention, and I had mistaken that for love. But attention that costs you everyone else isn't love. It's captivity with a compliment on top. I sat at that table, and I saw myself clearly for the first time in 14 months. And the woman I saw had gotten so small I barely recognized her. I ended it that week. Didn't yell, didn't accuse, I just said, "This isn't working for me, Norval." and his reaction told me everything his charm had been hiding. He was hurt, then confused, then angry. He said I was throwing away something beautiful. He said my friends were filling my head with nonsense. And then he said, "After everything I've given you." You hear that? Not we, not us. After everything I've given you, like I was supposed to be grateful for the attention that had cost me my village, like the cage was a gift because it was gilded. Now, I don't think Norval knew what he was doing, not fully. I think he was a lonely man whose wife had died and who was terrified of being alone again, and that terror made him grip. The tighter he held on, the smaller my world got. His loneliness wasn't malice, but loneliness with power over your schedule is still control. Fear with a smile on it is still fear. And I let it happen. I need to own that part. I saw the size. I heard the guilt. I felt my world getting smaller, and I told myself it meant he loved me. Because I was lonely too. And loneliness made me rewrite his story into something prettier than the truth. Antoine never once made me feel guilty for having a full life. He liked that I was full. When I came home from Wednesdays, he'd ask what Eula May said. When the grandkids came over, he was on the floor playing with them. He understood that a woman with a village is a stronger woman. Norval wanted me empty of everyone but him, and he called that love. I went back to my Wednesdays. First lunch back, all four of us at the table. Eula May looked across at me and said, "There she is." I went back to my Saturdays. Soline and Marcellus. I didn't explain where I'd been. I just showed up, the way I always had before him, consistently, fully. Rosalie hugged me at her door one evening and said quietly, "I'm glad you're back, Mama." I am too, baby. I am too. Now, if you're seeing someone, a nice man, a charming man, a man who tells you he just wants you all to himself, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Watch what happens when you make plans that don't include him. Not what he says, what his face does, what his voice does. Does he sigh? Does he go quiet? Does he find a reason to need you at the exact moment you're walking out the door? That's not love, baby. That's a leash with a smile on it. A man who loves you wants your world to be big. A man who needs to own you wants your world to be small. I'm 74 years old. I've got my Wednesdays, my Saturdays, my grandchildren, my daughter, and my village. And no man, no matter how charming, no matter how attentive, no matter how much he says he misses me, is ever going to make me small again. Share this with a woman who's getting smaller. She might not see it yet, but you do.